So, anyway, so to begin this message, what I want to explain first is what led up to me having this information to be able to share with you guys. So last night I had a supernatural playing, and I was also zoning out on my phone playing a game while I was listening and watching Supernatural. And I all of a sudden just had this overwhelming feeling come over me that I needed to pray. So I put my phone down and I started praying. And then while I was praying and meditating, and of course Supernatural still going on in the background, all of a sudden it was like my attention got zoom focused into that particular scene. And so for those of you who are familiar with Supernatural, it is the episode where Metatron has betrayed the angels and cast them out of heaven. And so it's when all of the angels are falling from heaven, and so you see the sky coming down on it. And as I'm zoned in and focused on that scene with hyper intensity, all of a sudden I just start having all these different flashes of all the things that are happening right now with the virus, with the rioting, with all of it. And the thing that ended up being said to me after all of these things are coming out and these scenes are superimposing on themselves was that the underlying message that everybody has and that they're trying to say is that they just want to be loved. They just want to be heard. So really, when we take out all the political nuances and differences that are dividing us, and we strip it down to the basics, it's a message of wanting to be loved and an absence of feeling loved. And until we actually start internalizing and going inside ourselves, we can't see that that's what's at the root cause driving it. It's an absence of love. I mean, when I say absence of love, I'm not talking about people will be like, well, that's crazy because I have a wonderful family and I'm in a relationship, blah, 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 blah. But realistically, if you start really thinking about it, there's something that you're missing in your life that is causing you to not feel unconditional love for yourself and in your life. So the message here is, and all glory to God, really, honestly, because it's a God thing, is that at the root of this, we want to be, this thing of wanting to be loved, it's driving us to be making choices and decisions based on emotion, because emotion is at the root of all of it. And so when we are feeling a lack of love in some way, shape, or form in our life, that lack of love makes it easier for things like, and that emotion being there makes it easier for things like fear, which those who are familiar with all of my things that I've talked about, I'm real big on talking about fear, because fear is really driving a lot of us right now. And so anyway, so the other part of this that is really important is that when you're operating from high emotions, and whether it's the lack of love or love driven, or it's fear driven or hate driven, it's emotionally charged decisions, which means that until we step back and allow our emotions to dissipate and disappear from that decision making and that thought process, we're not going to see things clearly. For example, all of you guys have probably had an experience in your life where you've had a significant other or a family member or a friend that you've not seen eye to eye with, that you've had an argument with. And later on, when the argument's done and over with, and you pull yourself back from it and you start reflecting on everything, then you start realizing how there's different things that you could have done to make the situation maybe turn out differently or go differently. So that's an example. You're stepping away and you're letting, once the emotions have dissipated and gone away from the situation, then you start having this clarity that's happening. And so right now, everything that's going on behind the scenes of all the different things that are going on in the world, especially here in the US, is that it's emotionally driven. And until we start stepping back and taking that emotion out of it, then we're going to be missing different pieces of things that could actually make a better outcome. And so, for instance, another example I want to give to you guys is that of Martin Luther King. He stood for something. He had a dream and a vision. He wanted all men to be created equal. But he didn't advocate violence. He did it from a positive standpoint and a positive light. And that's how he stood for his beliefs. So emulate people when you're out trying to share your story of the things that you want to see and the changes you want to see in the world. Aside from it being important for us to be the changes that we want to see ourselves in the world, find somebody that you can look up to from the past that did do things that were life-changing and world-changing. So emulate Martin Luther King, study him, study Jesus Christ, study Buddha, study Dalai Lama, all of these different people. They had messages of hope and inspiration, and they didn't do it from a violent standpoint. So find somebody like that to make your hero and to emulate. The other piece here that I want to share with you real quick is that when we are fueled by emotion, and this is really important, especially for people with different religious beliefs and faiths, because at the root of all religious beliefs, love is the answer, and it projects that, and it says to be mindful of our thoughts and our thinking. So be mindful of your thoughts and what you're doing. But realistically, right now, for those of you, especially that are Christian faith, when you're focusing, and I don't, and again, this is no political sides here at all, because there's people who follow the Christian beliefs on both sides of the spectrum. But again, this also can work for you regardless of if you're Christian-based belief or not. See, me, myself, I personally believe in God, but I don't believe in the organization of the religion. So I see a lot of people that say they believe in God that are within the church, but they're not actually practicing the beliefs that the Bible says, and they somehow twist it and think it's okay for other people should be following it, but they themselves have some sort of reason why they don't have to themselves. And so with that being said, that's part of the whole falling angels thing. Like the message that I got in that was that too many people are having their eyes on the world right now, and they've forgotten about God. They've forgotten about the higher power and connecting to the higher power. And here's the thing with that, which ties back to emotionally driven responses. When we are overly emotional and we are using those emotions to guide our thoughts and our thinking and our actions and our behaviors, especially on major choices that can impact not only our own personal lives, but the lives of others around us, then we are clouded by all that noise of the world going on around us, which means that we cannot hear the small voice of the Creator, whatever he may be to, and whatever way you look at him, but the eternal and universal force and energy of creation and the all-knowing up there, he has a small voice. It's quiet. It's a quiet voice that's inside of us. And for us to be able to reach enlightenment, we have to be able to go inside of ourselves and pull into ourselves to be able to connect with that divine energy and that divine source. And when you're not doing that on the scientific level and spectrum, we've got 3 different layers of our being. We've got our physical, we've got our emotional, but we've also got our energetic or spiritual self too. And when you are not in alignment with all 3, and the majority of the world, fortunately, right now is not in alignment, because we really have stepped out of that and disconnected from that spiritual segment and part of ourselves. So to be able to clear those emotions and be able to seek truth and knowledge, which is from within, from the Creator, and to wake up into enlightenment, you have to disconnect yourself from those emotions, and you have to go internal, and you have to stop the noise of the world and stop focusing on the noise of the world to be able to start hearing that voice that's really soft and small, to be able to reach that enlightenment period, and also thereby reaching healing. So the other thing is that, and the last piece here that I want to share in this message with everyone, is that until we start doing that internalization and disconnecting from the emotions of the world, and then we're not going to be able to see clearly the answer, and we're not going to be able to heal the divides. Also, the other thing is in order for us to heal the world, we have to internalize and heal ourselves. We have to heal what's broken in each of us ourselves. And if we start on an individual basis, being able to start working on ourselves to heal what's broken within ourselves, and to be able to come back to that spiritual alignment and component to where we're living with in alignment with all levels of our spirituality and who we are and our beings, then we're always going to have that absence of the divine in us. And when we are disconnected from the divine, healing of the world and the broken of the world is not going to end up being able to happen. So for us to end up being able to heal the world, we have to be able to first heal ourselves. And then we have to be that change ourselves and emulate that within ourselves. We have to be different for ourselves. And that's how you lead and you lead others. It's by example. So it's not with fighting. It's not with this back and forth bickering between each other. It's leading by example. And so I also want to share a little bit, and if you scrolled backwards on my feed, you'll find this post. But it was a post from the Black Lives Matter movement, and it was probably one of the most understood thing and logical posts that I've seen. And it had two pictures. It had a picture of the people rioting, and then it had a picture of people back at the people of color and the slave days. And at the top, the person who I found it from had said, "What are they really afraid of?" And it said, they're not afraid of this when it showed the rioting and things like that. They're afraid of this. And they're afraid of being a slave again and history repeating itself. And that is, I can understand that and I can see that. But the reality and the truth is that almost everybody right now is afraid of that and becoming a slave. That's why there's so much being talked about when it comes to that, because on the right, we see the same thing. We see freedoms being taken away from people. And regardless of the reasoning behind it, we're not that different. Really, we're all trying to fight for the same thing, essentially. So until we start realizing that and we're stepping back from situations, we're not going to be able to see things like that, where there is this middle ground that you can be able to find, to be able to start understanding the other side of the situation, to be able to create that unity that is needed in this country right now. So we have to be able to disconnect ourselves from the world and the things that are going on in the world, to be able to see clearly all sides and understand each view, to be able to find that middle ground, to be able to start that healing process. But again, like I said, it starts inside first, because that spiritual side is, his voice is a small, quiet voice. And when you're drowning it out by all the stuff going on in the world, you're not going to hear his voice. And his voice is the only one that's going to be able to guide you. The higher voice and the all powerful and the creator, his voice is the only one that is the voice of truth and reason. And also that, like I said, that spiritual part of us, if we're not balanced with that in our own lives, in our own spiritual self, in our spiritual body, then we're not hearing those messages. So we're going to continue to create divides, because we're not we have that absence. So that being said, I hope that this message has spoken to some of you, and that it helps to start giving some clarity and helps to start beginning to heal some of the divisions and the fights. Really, this battle is bigger than all of us. This battle belongs to God and the higher power and the creator. And until we ourselves realize that and lay down our own weapons and our own swords against each other, we're not going to see that. So much love and blessings to everyone. And thank you so much for joining me today.